What happens when a self-made millionaire decides his pregnant wife is no longer good enough? He finds a new, glamorous replacement, a famous actress. He serves his wife, Elara, with divorce papers, offering her scraps, intending to toss her aside like yesterday's news. He wants her gone before his big IPO. But he made one fatal miscalculation. He thought he married a simple art curator. He didn't realize he married Elara Vance, the sole heiress to the $80 billion Vance Global Steel Dynasty. And she's not going anywhere. The penthouse on Fifth Avenue was a symphony of beige, chrome, and glass. It was Julian Thorne's masterpiece, a monument to his arrival. Julian, a man who had clawed his way up from a middle-class upbringing in Ohio to become a minor titan of New York private equity, loved telling the story. He'd founded Thorne Capital with a small inheritance and unrelenting vision, and was now, at 38, on the cusp of true, undeniable wealth, a multi-billion-dollar IPO. His wife, Elara, preferred the library. It was the one room she'd been allowed to design. While the rest of the 8,000-square-foot apartment was Julian's cold shrine, the library was warm, filled with books, antique maps, and the faint, comforting scent of old paper and jasmine tea. Elara Thorne, née Vance, a name she hadn't used in 6 years, was, to the outside world, the perfect founder's wife. Beautiful in a quiet, aristocratic way, with intelligent grey eyes and a calm demeanour that contrasted with Julian's restless, crackling energy. She was an art curator, specialising in obscure Renaissance pieces, a job Julian found charming and appropriate for a woman who didn't need to work. He had no idea that her charming job was a simple passion, a way to stay sane while hiding from a life she never wanted. He had no idea that her family, the Vances, could buy and sell his entire building with the petty cash from their quarterly dividends. Elara had met Julian at a Sotheby's auction. He was bidding, loudly and competitively, on a gaudy, modern piece. She was there to consult on a lost Titian. He'd been charmed by her unimpressed air. She had been charmed by his drive, his ambition, and the fact that he'd never heard the name Vance in connection with anything other than a long-dead brand of tool and die. He saw her as Elara Vance, the broke graduate student with expensive taste. She let him. She had been running from the Vance Global Steel empire, from her formidable father, Marcus Vance, who believed love was a variable in a balance sheet. She wanted to be loved for herself. Julian, it seemed, did. Now, 6 years later, Elara was 5 months pregnant. She sat in the library, one hand on the gentle curve of her stomach, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety that had been tightening for weeks. Julian was changing. He was never a warm man, but he had been attentive. Now, he was absent. The late nights, once IPO prep, were now just meetings. The business trips to Los Angeles, once rare, were now weekly. He'd become obsessed with his phone, angling it away from her with a casualness that was deeply, precisely studied. "You're nesting in this dusty old room again," he said, standing in the doorway. He wasn't in his usual Tom Ford suit. He wore a black silk shirt, unbuttoned one button too many, and a new, ridiculously expensive Patek Philippe, the Sky Moon tourbillon she'd seen him eyeing online. It must have cost $500,000. "Just reading to the baby," Elara murmured, closing the book. "Are you packing? I thought the LA trip was next week." "It's been moved up. Client dinner." He was barely looking at her, checking his reflection in the dark glass of a framed map. "We're celebrating the pre-IPO valuation. Morgan Stanley is ecstatic." "That's wonderful, Julian." She stood, moving to kiss him. He offered a cheek, his scent a mix of expensive cologne and something else, a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. "Don't wait up," he said, patting her stomach distractedly. "Big day." He left. The apartment, her gilded cage, suddenly felt suffocatingly quiet. Later that night, she saw a new alert from page 6 on her iPad, a perk of Julian's new social climbing obsession. The headline was, "Tech Titan, Julian Thorne gets cozy with Serafina Hayes at Chateau Marmont." There was a photo, Julian laughing, his arm draped possessively around the waist of a stunning, flame-haired woman. Serafina Hayes was a B-list actress with an A-list reputation for breaking up marriages. She was wearing a dress that left nothing to the imagination, and in the photo, Julian was wearing the exact suit he had claimed was at the dry cleaners last week. The knot in Ilara's chest became a cold, hard stone. The scent on his collar wasn't just perfume, it was Serafina's signature scent. Scandal. Ilara knew this because Julian had bought a bottle of it for her last month, claiming a colleague recommended it. She'd hated it. Now she knew why. He wasn't buying a gift. He was practicing her alibi. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in gaslighting. Serafina Hayes, she's a potential investor. Her father is some old money oil guy. You're being paranoid, Ilara. It's the hormones. Chateau Marmont. It was a networking event. Page 6 always exaggerates. You know that. Why are you so insecure? I'm building an empire for us, for this family, and you're in here crying over a tabloid. I need you to be the strong, supportive wife, Ilara. Not this mess. He was good. He was so good that for a few days she almost believed him. She tried to push the image of his hand on Serafina's waist out of her mind. She tried to focus on the baby, on the nursery she was painting, in a soft, neutral grey. But the cracks were spreading. Julian's phone now had a new passcode. He took calls in the high-tech, soundproofed Zoom room he'd had installed, locking the door. And the joint credit card statements, which Ilara usually managed, were suddenly being handled by my new accountant, according to Julian. Just to streamline things before the IPO. All assets need to be consolidated under Thorne Capital. Ilara wasn't a fool. She was a Vance. She may have rejected her family's money, but she had not rejected their education. She knew what consolidating assets before a major financial event meant. It meant he was moving things, hiding them. The final brutal crack came on a Tuesday evening. Julian was supposed to be in a red-eye board meeting on a video call. Ilara had a doctor's appointment, a checkup on the baby. The pregnancy, her doctor warned, was becoming high risk. Her blood pressure was dangerously elevated. "You need to eliminate stress, Mrs. Thorne," Dr. Alistair said, his face grave. "Whatever is happening in your life, it's affecting you and the baby." Heart pounding with a new kind of fear, not just for her marriage, but for her child, Ilara returned to the penthouse. She needed to tell Julian. She needed to make him listen. The apartment was dark. He wasn't home. His red-eye meeting was clearly a lie. She sat on the cold designer sofa in the living room, the city lights glittering below, and waited. At 2:17 a.m. the elevator chimed, opening directly into the foyer. Julian stumbled in, his tie gone, his silk shirt stained with lipstick. Not just a smudge, but a clear, deliberate mark high on his collar. And with him, giggling, was Serafina Hayes, wrapped in his $10,000 cashmere overcoat. They both froze when they saw Ilara, silhouetted in the dim light. Serafina, to her credit, was the first to recover. She let out a small, theatrical gasp. "Oh, Julian, darling," she purred, her voice a throaty whisper. "You didn't tell me she'd be awake." Julian's face, for a split second, showed panic. Then it hardened into something Elara had never seen before. Pure, unadulterated contempt. "Elara," he said, his voice cold and flat. "Go to bed." "Get her out," Elara said, her voice shaking, but low and steady. She refused to scream. Vance never screamed. "Excuse me?" Julian stepped forward. "This is my home." "Get this woman," Elara said, her eyes locked on Serafina. "Out of my home." Serafina laughed, a tinkling, awful sound. "Oh, honey, no. This is my home now. Or it will be. Julian's just cleaning out the old inventory." Elara's gaze shifted to Julian. She said nothing. She just waited. Julian sighed, a put-upon, exasperated sound, as if he were the one being inconvenienced. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Elara, it's over. I've been meaning to tell you." "It's over," Elara repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Just like that." "It's not just like that. We've been growing apart for months. You've been so distant, so wrapped up in this baby." He said the word baby as if it were an infestation. "Julian," Serafina whispered, tugging on his arm. "Let's go to the mark. We can let her process." "Right," Julian said, straightening his jacket. He turned to Elara. "We'll talk in the morning. My lawyer will be in touch. I suggest you get one of your own." He didn't even look at her as he guided Serafina back into the elevator. The doors slid shut, leaving Elara alone in the foyer, the scent of scandal and cheap victory hanging in the air. She stood there for a full minute before her knees buckled. She didn't fall. She deliberately sank to the cold marble floor, her hands protectively cradling her stomach as the first, sharp, terrifying cramp of preterm labor seized her. The next morning, Elara woke up in a guest room. She didn't remember moving. The cramps had subsided to a dull ache, but the terror remained. There was a noise in the foyer. Not Julian. A tall man in a sharp, unfamiliar suit was placing a thick, leather-bound folder on the hall console table. He saw her and flinched, as if startled to find her there. "Mrs. Thorne?" he asked. He was a bike messenger, but one who specialized in legal documents. "Yes?" "This is for you. From Skadden Arps. You need to sign here, acknowledging receipt." Skadden, Arps, Slate, Merga, and Flom. Julian wasn't just getting a lawyer. He was getting a legion, the most ruthless, expensive corporate and divorce firm in the city. She signed. The man left. Elara opened the folder. The first page was a petition for divorce. The second was a proposed marital settlement agreement. She read it, and the world tilted. Julian, citing irreconcilable differences, was filing for a swift, no-fault divorce. He was demanding it be finalized in 30 days. The reason was buried in the financial jargon. To ensure financial clarity and asset protection prior to the Thorne Capital IPO, initial public offering. He wasn't just divorcing her. He was clearing a liability off his balance sheet. Then she saw the generous offer. In recognition of their 6-year marriage, and, in good faith, pending a conclusive paternity test for the unborn child, Julian Thorne was offering 1. A one-time, non-negotiable payout of $500,000. 2. A 2-bedroom condominium in Murray Hill, a nice but utterly unglamorous neighborhood. 3. A modest child support sum, contingent on the aforementioned paternity test proving his fatherhood. 4. A comprehensive, ironclad non-disclosure agreement, barring Elara from ever speaking about Julian, his business, his personal life, or their marriage, under penalty of forfeiting the entire settlement. $500,000. He was about to make billions on an IPO. He was offering her, his wife of 6 years and the mother of his child, $500,000, and an apartment in a neighborhood he wouldn't even drive through. The line about the paternity test was the deepest cut. It wasn't just an insult, it was a legal strategy. It was designed to paint her as an unfaithful, gold-digging opportunist, a narrative that would play well for him with his new, glossy magazine-reading investors. She felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't just a breakup. This was an execution. He was trying to erase her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Not, "I'm sorry," or "Can we talk?" Just a cold, single line. "My lawyer sent the papers. It's a very generous offer. Sign it, Elara. Don't make this ugly. It's better for everyone." Better for everyone. He meant better for him. Better for Serafina. Better for the IPO. In the midst of her rage, she saw him. He wasn't on TV, not yet. He was outside, across the street, on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a place they used to go. He was posing for a phalanx of photographers. He was not alone. Serafina Hayes was on his arm, dazzling in a red dress, her hand placed strategically on his chest. They were laughing, kissing for the cameras. A planned, public debut. He's divorcing me in a legal document, while simultaneously debuting his new relationship on the steps of the Met. Elara walked to the window, the 40-page insult in her hand. She watched them. Julian looked up, directly at their apartment window, and his smile widened. He couldn't see her, but he knew she'd be watching. He raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a toast to his own victory. The arrogance, the sheer, unadulterated hubris. He thought she was weak. He thought she was a simple, penniless art curator. He thought $500,000 would be a windfall for her. He thought she'd be so scared of the paternity test threat that she would sign the NDA, take the scraps, and disappear. He had forgotten one very important thing. She was pregnant, yes. She was heartbroken, absolutely. But she was not weak, and she was not penniless. "You want ugly, Julian?" Elara whispered to the window, her hand moving from her stomach to her phone. "You have no idea how ugly a Vance can be." The next 48 hours were a descent into a special kind of hell. Elara's first call was to her OB-GYN, Dr. Alistair. The stress of the confrontation and the legal papers had triggered another round of sharp, terrifying cramps. "Elara, I'm not mincing words," he said over the phone, his voice tight with concern. "You have placenta previa, and your blood pressure is critical. You are risking a preterm delivery and your own life. You must be on immediate, total bed rest. I want you admitted to Weill Cornell for observation." "I can't," Elara said, her voice thin. "Not right now. Julian, I can't go to the hospital right now. Elara, this isn't a suggestion. This is a medical order. Please," she begged, "give me 24 hours. I have to secure a few things. I'll stay in bed, I promise. In the penthouse. I'll have food delivered. I won't move." He hesitated, a long, unhappy sigh. "Fine. 24 hours. If your pressure isn't down by tomorrow, I'm sending an ambulance. And Elara, whatever it is, it's not worth your child's life." She hung up, shaking. She went online to order groceries, a week's worth of simple, healthy food she could prepare from the penthouse kitchen without leaving. Her card was declined. Account status: frozen. She tried her debit card, linked to their joint checking account. Frozen. She tried her Amex, the one Julian had insisted she get, the Black Centurion card. Frozen. He hadn't just filed for divorce, he had cut her off, completely. In the 12 hours since he'd left with Serafina, his lawyers had filed an emergency petition with a family court judge, claiming Elara was emotionally unstable and a financial flight risk who might liquidate marital assets out of spite. The judge, seeing only the Thorn capital letterhead and the Scadden, ARPS filing, had granted a temporary freeze on all joint accounts. She was trapped, 5 months pregnant, on doctor-ordered bed rest, in an 8,000-square-foot penthouse with no access to money. She looked in her wallet. She had 87 baubles in cash. The intercom buzzed. It was the doorman, a man who usually greeted her with a warm smile. His voice was stiff, professional. "Mrs. Thorn, Mr. Belson is here to see you. He says you're expecting him." "I'm not," she started. "He's from Julian Thorn's legal team. He has clearance." The elevator doors opened, and a man who looked more like a bouncer than a lawyer stepped out, holding a small box. "Mrs. Thorn," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I'm here to deliver this, and to oversee a transition." "A transition?" He handed her the box. Inside was a cheap, prepaid burner phone and a set of keys. "Mr. Thorn has arranged for you to be moved to the Murray Hill condominium, as outlined in the settlement proposal. His new associate will be arriving shortly to begin redecorating the penthouse." Elara stared at him. "He's kicking me out." "He's providing you with shelter, ma'am," the man said, reciting a line. "The new tenant, Miss Seraphina Hayes, has a design team arriving at 4 p.m. Mr. Thorn requests you vacate the premises by then." It was 1 p.m. He was giving her 3 hours. Pregnant, high risk, and penniless, he was throwing her out of her home and handing the keys to his mistress. "My clothes," Elara whispered, panic rising. My things. The nursery. Mr. Thorn has arranged for your personal effects to be moved to the new location. The items in the nursery have been placed in storage, as their, provenance is in question." The paternity test. He was even holding the baby's crib hostage over the paternity test. This was the lowest point. This was the bottom. He wasn't just divorcing her. He was attempting to annihilate her, to strip her of her home, her health, her dignity, and her child, all in one swift, brutal stroke. He thought this would break her. He thought this would be the final push that would make her sign the papers, take the $87 in her wallet and the keys to the condo, and disappear. The man, Belson, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm instructed to wait here until you have left." Elara looked at the man. She looked at the burner phone. She looked at the keys. Then she looked past him, at the portrait of Julian's smug face, a Man of the Year award painting, hanging in the foyer. She felt the baby kick, a faint, insistent flutter. It was a reminder. You are not alone, and you are not weak. "Mr. Belson," she said, her voice suddenly devoid of all its earlier tremor. It was cold. It was steel. "You may wait, but I suggest you get comfortable. I have one phone call to make, and I'm not going to Murray Hill." "Ma'am, you have to." "I have to do nothing," Elara said, turning her back on him. "Get out of my way. I need to use the library." She walked past him, her head held high, and entered the one room that was hers. She locked the heavy oak doors. She ignored Belson's insistent, then panicked, knocking. She sat at her antique desk. She didn't pick up the burner phone. She didn't pick up her iPhone, which Julian was undoubtedly tracking. She opened a locked drawer in her desk. Inside, beneath a first-edition copy of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, was a simple, old-fashioned satellite phone. It was brick-heavy, clunky, and utterly untraceable by conventional means. A gift from her father. "For emergencies," he had said. She powered it on. It beeped, connecting to a private Vance Global satellite. She dialed a number from memory, a number she had not dialed in 6 long, stubborn years. It rang once. A crisp, familiar, no-nonsense voice answered. "Read." Ilara let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for her entire marriage. A single tear, not of sadness, but of relief, traced a path down her cheek. "Evelyn," Ilara said. "It's me. It's Ilara Vance." There was a half-second of stunned silence. Then the voice on the other end shifted from lawyer to protector. "Lara, my God, are you all right? Where are you?" "I'm in New York, Evelyn, and I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant, and my husband is trying to erase me." "Give me the address," Evelyn Reed said, her voice turning to ice. "The Vance jet is on the tarmac at Teterboro. We're wheels up in 20 minutes. We'll be there in 3 hours." "Evelyn, he's Julian Thorne. He has Skadden, ARPS. He's freezing my assets. He's trying to take my baby." A dry, mirthless laugh came over the line. "Skadden ARPS? How quaint. Lara, listen to me. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to anyone. Don't leave the building. Lock your door. We're coming. And tell me, this Julian Thorne, is he a publicly traded man?" "Not yet," Ilara said, a dark, unfamiliar power rising in her. "He's planning an IPO for Thorne Capital in 30 days. 30 days, Evelyn mused. Oh, that's more than enough time. "Evelyn, he's not just going to lose a divorce, Lara," Evelyn Reed said, the sound of a private jet engine whining in the background. "He's going to lose everything." The 3 hours Ilara waited were the strangest of her life. Mr. Belson, the legal goon, had pounded on the library door for 20 minutes before giving up, apparently intimidated by the sheer, solid oak authority of the door. He was now pacing in the foyer, making frantic, whispered calls to Julian's lawyers. Ilara, meanwhile, sat in her father's worn leather armchair. She drank a glass of water. She ate an apple she'd had in her desk. She placed her hands on her stomach and spoke to her baby. "It's all right," she murmured. "Mummy just had to make a call. The family is coming." At 3:47 p.m., the penthouse intercom buzzed, a long, aggressive series of beeps. Mr. Belson, thinking it was Serafina's design team, practically ran to answer it. "Yes?" he snapped into the speaker. The doorman's voice, usually so placid, was trembling. "Sir, there are 3. There's a motorcade, sir. 3 black Rolls-Royce Phantoms and 2 Maybachs. They've blocked the entrance to the building. They say they're here for Mrs. Thorne." Belson went pale. "What? Who are they?" "We're not expecting. They're not asking for permission, sir. They're already on their way up. They have their own elevator key." Belson fumbled with his phone, no doubt to call Julian, but it was too late. The private elevator doors slid open, but it wasn't a team of flamboyant interior designers. It was Evelyn Reed. Evelyn was a woman built of sharp angles and sharper intellect. She was in her late 50s, with a severe black bob, and wore a custom-made black Armani suit. She was, in Ilara's father's words, the only person who scared the SEC. She was the chief legal counsel for Vance Global Steel, and she managed the Vance family's private, multi-billion-dollar trust. She was not alone. Behind her stood 4 men. They were not lawyers. They were tall, impossibly broad, and wore identical, simple black suits with earpieces. This was the Vance family's private security detail, all former Mossad or MI6. Mr. Belson looked like he was about to faint. "You," Evelyn said, not to Belson, but to one of her security team. "Get that woman's bags, the ones by the door." She pointed to the 2 small suitcases Ilara had packed in a daze. "These," Evelyn said, kicking one of the designer suitcases Serafina had left in the hall, "are not hers. Throw them in the service hall." "Yes, ma'am," one of the security men said. "And you," Evelyn said, finally fixing Mr. Belson with a stare so cold it could freeze hydrogen. "Who are you?" I'm Belson, from Scaddon, Arps. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Thorne. Ma'am, Mrs. Thorne, you have to vacate. This is—" Evelyn held up a single, manicured hand. "Stop talking. You're trespassing." "I am not. This is Mr. Thorne's residence. And this is the marital residence," Evelyn snapped, "of which my client, Elara Vance Thorne, owns 50%, regardless of what's in your fraudulent, unfiled emergency order brief. You are a non-resident. You are therefore trespassing. Harris," she said to the lead security man, "remove him." "You can't touch me. I'm a lawyer," Belson shrieked as Harris, a man the size of a small mountain, grabbed him by the arm. "He's not touching you," Evelyn said calmly. "He's escorting you. You have two options. You can walk to the service elevator, or you can be carried. Your choice." Belson, white with rage and fear, yanked his arm free. "You'll be hearing from us. This is assault. This is Tuesday, Mr. Belson," Evelyn said, already bored. "Tell Mr. Arps that Evelyn Reed sends her regards, and tell him that the Vance family's private counsel, Reed and Vanguard, will be handling this. Now, get out." Belson scrambled into the service elevator. The library doors opened. Elara stood there, pale but composed. Evelyn's entire demeanor softened. She rushed to Elara, enveloping her in a hug. "Oh, Lara, look at you. You're too thin. And you're pregnant." "5 months," Elara whispered, clinging to her. "Evelyn, he froze everything. He's kicking me out." "He's not," Evelyn said, her voice pure steel again. "He's not doing anything. We're leaving. But not to Murray Hill." She turned to her team. "Harris, take Mrs. Thorne. Be gentle. 2 men stay here. Secure the apartment. Change the locks. Nothing leaves this apartment. Nothing. Especially not the art, the furniture, or the contents of the nursery. Mr. Thorne's community property is now in legal dispute. Let Miss Hayes's design team know they can schedule an appointment with me." "Where are we going?" Elara asked, as Harris gently guided her toward the elevator. "Will Cornell first. Your father already spoke to Dr. Alistair. Your old friend, Dr. Alistair, by the way. Your father funded his entire cardiothoracic wing. You're not just getting a room, you're getting the entire 10th floor maternity ward. It's been cleared." "After that," Evelyn said, stepping into the elevator with her, "we're going to the St. Regis. Your father secured the presidential suite. Indefinitely." They descended in the opulent, wood-paneled elevator. "My father," Elara said, dreading the answer. "Is he furious that I'm like this?" Evelyn gave a rare, thin smile. "Oh, Lara, your father is incandescent. He's not angry at you. He's angry he didn't see this. He's angry this fintech parasite touched you. He's angry you were right," Evelyn said. "You ran away to see if someone would love you for you. You got your answer. It was no. Now he gets to give his answer." The elevator doors opened to the lobby. It was a circus. The lobby was full of Julian's building staff, all staring as the Vance security team formed a perfect, protective diamond around Elara and Evelyn. The doorman rushed to open the main door. Outside, the street was, as he'd said, blocked. The 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms sat there, engines idling, a statement of such overwhelming old money power that it made Julian's flashy, new money penthouse look like a cheap rental. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, a car pulled up, a battered taxi. The back door opened and Serafina Hayes stepped out, followed by 2 men in skinny jeans holding fabric swatches. "What is this?" Serafina demanded, her eyes wide at the fleet of Rolls-Royces. "Is this a movie shoot? Who are you people?" She saw Elara, her face twisted into a mask of smug pity. "Oh, You're still here. Honey, you really need to take the hint. Julian, the staff is... Evelyn Reed didn't even look at her. She simply said to Harris, "Get her out of the way." Harris, who had been trained in crowd control in the world's most dangerous war zones, didn't touch Serafina. He simply stepped in front of her, his body a 280-pound wall of muscle and bespoke tailoring. "Excuse me, Mum." Serafina, for the first time, looked intimidated. I'm Serafina Hayes. I live here now." Evelyn, 1 foot in the lead Rolls-Royce, paused. She turned, looking Serafina up and down as if she were a piece of uninspected livestock. "Ms. Hayes," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the traffic noise. "My name is Evelyn Reed. I am a lawyer for the Vance family. This building," she gestured, "this block is now a matter of private legal dispute. If you or your associates step foot inside that lobby, I will have you arrested for criminal trespass. Have a lovely afternoon." The door shut with a satisfying, vacuum-sealed thunk. The motorcade pulled away, leaving Serafina Hayes and her design team standing on the curb, next to a pile of luggage. Julian Thorne was having the best day of his life. He and Serafina were the #1 story on every gossip site. Titan and the thespian, Julian Thorne makes it official with Serafina Hayes. His phone was blowing up. Not with investors, they didn't care about his personal life, but with the social crowd. He'd gotten text messages from 3 different movie producers and a fashion mogul. He was in. He was sitting in a celebratory lunch at Jean-Georges with his bankers from Morgan Stanley, finalizing the IPO roadshow. "The appetite for this is massive, Julian," said Robert Chen, the lead banker. "We're looking at an opening valuation of $4 billion. Your personal stake will be worth, well, you'll be a billionaire 3 times over." Julian smiled, swirling the 500 glass Burgundy in his glass. "I told you, Thorne Capital is the future." His phone buzzed. It was Belson, his lawyer. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Ignored. Buzzed a 3rd time. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Julian said, annoyed. "Have to take this. My divorce lawyer. Cleaning up a small mess." He stepped into the lobby. "Belson, what? I'm in a meeting." "Mr. Thorne, sir, we have a problem. A big problem." Belson's voice was squeaking. Mrs. Thorne, she has lawyers. Not just any lawyers." "What are you talking about? A $500 an hour divorce attorney. I'll buy him. Just serve the papers." "Sir, you don't understand. A woman named Evelyn Reed showed up. She threw me out. She said she was from Reed and Vanguard and the Vance family. She had a literal motorcade, sir. Rolls-Royces, Maybachs, bodyguards, like the Secret Service." Julian's blood went cold. "Vance? What Vance? Her maiden name?" "Yes, sir. She's... Mr. Thorne, who is your wife?" "She's a no-name art curator from Pittsburgh. Her family is in manufacturing. Small time." "Mr. Thorne," Belson said, his voice dropping. "I just ran the name. Reed and Vanguard is the private legal arm for Vance Global Steel. Not small-time manufacturing, sir. Sir, I'm talking the Vances. Marcus Vance, the Steel King. They own mines, shipping lanes, half of the skyscrapers in Chicago. They're not millionaires, sir. They're richer than you're about to be." Julian's glass of Burgundy slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. "That's not possible," Julian whispered. She buys her clothes at consignment shops. She worked at a gallery. She's a Lara." "Sir, they've changed the locks on the penthouse. They've secured it. Ms. Hayes is on the sidewalk. And, sir, I just got an email from Evelyn Reed. It's a notice of legal action. They're not just rejecting the settlement. They're filing a countersuit." for intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraudulent inducement in a marital contract, and, sir, attempted coercion of a high-risk pregnant patient. Julian couldn't breathe. And, Mr. Thorne, the paternity test. They're agreeing to it. In fact, they're demanding it. They're demanding you take one, too. And they're demanding a full 10-year forensic audit of Thorne Capital as part of the marital asset discovery. The roadshow. The IPO. A forensic audit. No, Julian choked out. No, she can't. The IPO, it's private. It's my company. Sir, Belson said, under New York law, it's marital property, and they're not just claiming 50%. They're claiming 100% of Thorne Capital. That's insane! On what grounds? On the grounds that your initial seed money, the $5 million you inherited, wasn't an inheritance at all. They claim it was a wedding gift to Elara from her father, deposited into a blind trust for her, which you then improperly leveraged to found your company. Julian dropped his phone. He stumbled back to the table. Robert Chen, the banker, was smiling. Everything all right, Julian? Julian looked at the man. He looked at the stanza in nuestro lunch bill. He looked at his life. It wasn't a small inheritance. It was a blind trust, a wedding gift. He'd told Elara it was from his long-lost, rich uncle. She'd just believed him. He'd thought her stupid. He'd thought her naive. He hadn't realized she was just rich. Rich in a way he couldn't even comprehend. So rich that $5 million was a rounding error, a gift she never even bothered to track. He had built his entire $4 billion empire on her money, and he had just served her with divorce papers and threatened to take her baby. Julian? Robert Chen asked, his smile fading. You look like you've seen a ghost. I have to go, Julian mumbled. He ran, not walked, ran from the restaurant, leaving his bankers sitting at the table. He had to get to Elara. He had to apologize. He had to stop this. He got to the St. Regis, where his doorman had, after a frantic call, told him Elara's motorcade had gone. He was met at the entrance by two very large men in black suits. Mr. Thorne, said Harris, you are not welcome here. I need to see my wife. Elara, it's me. Mrs. Vance Thorne is under medical care and is not accepting visitors, especially not you. You are, in fact, legally barred from coming within 500 feet of her. What? That's not... I haven't been served. Harris handed him a new folder. This one was not leather-bound. It was simple, white, and terrifying. It was a temporary restraining order, signed by the Chief Justice of the New York Supreme Court, citing credible threats to the physical and mental well-being of a high-risk pregnant patient. Julian tore it open. He was locked out of his own home. He was locked out of his company's accounts. Evelyn's team had just filed an injunction against the IPO, citing the fraudulent seed money. And he was locked away from his wife. She can't do this, he roared. She's not, Harris said, with a hint of a smile. We are. Have a nice day, Mr. Thorne. Harris and the other guard turned and walked back into the hotel, leaving Julian Thorne, the self-made billionaire, screaming on the sidewalk, a restraining order in his hand, as the first fat drops of a cold November rain began to fall. The preliminary divorce hearing was a media war zone. Julian arrived first, attempting to project confidence in his Brioni suit, flanked by a $10,000 an hour legal team. He was bleeding money, and the IPO was officially delayed, citing market volatility. His investors were nervous. Julian, a reporter shouted, is it true your wife is a Vance? A Vance? Julian forced a grim smile. My wife and I are handling a private matter, privately. Then Elara arrived, The police had to clear the street for the 3-car Rolls-Royce convoy. The lead car's door was opened, and Alara stepped out. The media went silent. This was not the mousy curator's wife. This was Alara Vance. She wore a custom, deep emerald green coat, designed to accommodate her 5.5-month pregnancy with regal grace. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, powerful chignon. On her right hand, she wore a single, massive new ring, the Vance's family signet. She looked pale but powerful, and she glided up the steps, her gaze fixed forward, never once looking at the shell-shocked man she was still, for now, married to. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick. Julian and his team sat at one table. Alara and her Reed and Vanguard team sat at the other. Judge Margaret Walsh, known for having zero patience for arrogant men, entered. "This is a preliminary hearing," Judge Walsh said, "on the matter of Thorne versus Thorne, or I see here a counterfiling, Vance versus Thorne. Ms. Reed, your client is filing. Everything. This is quite a filing." "Your Honor," Julian's lawyer, Mr. Arps, stood up, attempting a conciliatory tone. "My client, Mr. Thorne, wishes to de-escalate. He has re-evaluated his initial generous offer. He is now prepared to offer Mrs. Vance Thorne a one-time settlement of $25 million plus the penthouse in exchange for a clean divorce and her signature on the NDA. Julian was staring at Alara, a pathetic, pleading look on his face. "Take the deal. Please." Evelyn Reed stood. "Your Honor, we thank Mr. Arps for his re-evaluation. However, we reject it. Utterly. $25 million is what my client's family trust pays in catering for their annual foundation gala. It is not a settlement. It is an insult," Arps spluttered. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that we are not here to negotiate," Evelyn snapped. "We are here for a full forensic accounting of Vance assets, namely the $5 million seed money Mr. Thorne fraudulently converted to found his company, a company we are claiming 100% of, as it is marital property funded entirely by my client's trust. We are also here to see that my client, the mother of Mr. Thorne's child—" "Alleged child," Arps interrupted. "A fatal mistake." Evelyn Reed smiled. "Ah, yes, the paternity. Your Honor, my client is more than willing to submit to a test. In fact, she demands it. We have already had a non-invasive prenatal test performed." She slid a file across the table. "Mr. Thorne is, indeed, the father. With 99.999% certainty. The real question, Your Honor." And here, Evelyn's voice dropped, becoming lethally precise, "is what else a full forensic audit of Mr. Thorne's finances will reveal." This was the killing blow. "I'm sure you're aware of the IPO," Evelyn continued, "but you're less aware of how Mr. Thorne secured his second and third round funding. He went to several less traditional lenders, hedge funds in the Cayman Islands, private lenders with, shall we say, Russian-sounding names, lenders who do not appreciate market volatility, lenders who will be fascinated to learn that his primary asset, his company, is actually the disputed property of a rival." Julian went white. Judge Walsh leaned forward. "And who," the judge asked, "is this a rival?" "Me," Alara said. It was the first time she had spoken. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the courtroom. Julian finally looked at her. "Me," Alara repeated. "You didn't just build your company on my money, Julian. You built it on my father's. The $5 million was a test you failed." Evelyn Reed provided the final nail. "Your Honor, we are not asking for a division of assets. We are filing for an annulment of the marriage based on fraudulent inducement. We are also filing for a full liquidation of Thorne Capital to repay the initial loan, plus interest, to the Vance Trust. And, as a separate matter, we are filing a civil suit for 100% of the remaining assets on behalf of the unborn child to be placed in a trust, managed by me. Julian's lawyer sank into his chair. I, Julian stammered, leaping to his feet. Ilara, please, I love you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. It was the IPO, the stress. Ilara looked at him, and for the first time, she felt nothing but cold, distant pity. You don't love me, Julian, she said, her voice clear. You don't even know me. You loved the idea of the broke girl who made you feel like a big man. You weren't in love with me. You were in love with your own reflection. She stood up. We're done here, Evelyn. You can't go, Julian yelled. Ilara, you'll ruin me. Ilara paused at the door. She looked back at him, a man completely broken. No, Julian, she said. I won't. You already did. The fallout was not a financial earthquake. It was a financial apocalypse. Julian, in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to save himself, tried to declare bankruptcy. He tried to hide personal assets, to wire money to an offshore account in Panama. He had forgotten who he was dealing with. Evelyn Reed's team of forensic accountants were not accountants. They were, as she put it, financial bloodhounds. They found the Panama account in 4 hours. They found the forgotten Patek Philippe watch collection. They found the deed to a gifted condo in Miami that he'd bought for Serafina, which they immediately seized. But the real, crushing, final twist wasn't in the courtroom. It was in a quiet, wood-paneled office at the headquarters of Reed and Vanguard. Julian had been invited to this meeting. His lawyers from Skadden, Arps had quit, citing irreconcilable conflicts and unpaid bills. He was now represented by a court-appointed, shell-shocked public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Julian sat, a hollowed-out shell of a man, across a 20-foot mahogany table from Ilara, Evelyn Reed, and a man Julian had never seen before. An older man, in his late 60s, with Ilara's grey eyes and a face that looked like it had been carved from a mountain. He wore a simple, dark grey suit, but it fit him with the authority of a military uniform. It was Marcus Vance, the Steel King. Mr. Thorne, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but it rumbled with a base-level power that made Julian flinch. I've been reviewing your life's work, Thorne Capital. It's impressive. What you built, the leverage, the exposure, very new money. Julian said nothing. You're a gambler, Marcus continued, and you're good at it. You took my $5 million and you parlayed it into a $4 billion valuation, a house of cards, to be sure, but a very tall one. Mr. Vance, sir, Julian began. I loved her. I still do. This is... Stop, Marcus said. It wasn't a request. Don't insult my daughter, and don't insult my intelligence. You don't love her. You don't even see her. You saw a prop, a charming accessory. He leaned forward. Evelyn, here, wants to liquidate you. She wants to take your company, break it into little pieces, and sell it for scrap to pay back the Russian investors you conned. It's a clean solution. A small, desperate spark of hope ignited in Julian. But I, Marcus said, am a builder. I don't like breaking things. I like acquiring them. Evelyn slid one final document across the table to Julian. This, Evelyn explained, is not a divorce settlement. This is a stock purchase agreement. Julian read the first line. His public defender gasped. We are not liquidating Thorne Capital, Evelyn said. We are absorbing it. Vance Global Steel's new Vance Ventures technology arm is acquiring Thorne Capital, for the grand sum of $1. $1? Julian choked. It's worth billions. It's worth nothing, Marcus corrected. It's an empty shell, leveraged to the hilt, facing half a dozen fraud investigations, and whose primary investors are unhappy. In fact, we, he gestured to himself and Evelyn, are the only thing standing between you and a gentleman named Dmitri Volkov, who, I'm told, is very keen to discuss default penalties with you. In person. Julian's face went ashen. So, Marcus continued, here is the real settlement, Julian. We will not be pursuing an annulment. Ilara, it seems, wants the divorce. She wants to be a divorcee, not a victim. So this is a divorce. You will sign this document. It gives you exactly what you offered her. What? Evelyn slid a second document. You will receive a one-time, non-negotiable payout of $500,000. You will be given a 2-bedroom condominium in Murray Hill, and you will sign a comprehensive, ironclad non-disclosure agreement, barring you from ever speaking about Ilara, her family, or Vance Global Steel for the rest of your natural life. It was his own offer, word for word. And, Evelyn added, all child support, medical and educational expenses for the baby will be handled in perpetuity by the Vance Trust. Your name will be on the birth certificate, but you will have 0 parental rights. Any attempt to contact the child or Ilara will be a violation of this agreement and the permanent restraining order, and will result in, it will result in Mr. Volkov getting your new address. Julian stared at the papers. His entire world, his billions, his penthouse, his Patek collection, his identity, all gone, reduced to 500 toinzirog and a condo he used to mock. Ilara had been silent the entire time. Now, she spoke. Sign it, Julian, she said. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic hatred. Why? Why are you doing this? You could have just left. You could have had half. Because you threatened my child, Ilara said, her voice quiet and deadly. You used my baby as a bargaining chip. You put the nursery in storage. You tried to make me, a high-risk pregnant woman, homeless. You didn't just want a divorce, Julian. You wanted an erasure. You wanted to destroy me. This, she gestured to the papers, this isn't a settlement. This is a mirror. This is you, getting exactly what you deserve. You get to live the life you thought was generous enough for me. Julian, trembling, picked up the pen. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at Ilara. He signed. He signed away his company. He signed away his parental rights. He signed away his life. Harris, Marcus Vance said into an intercom, Mr. Thorne is ready to leave. See him to his new home, and make sure he gets there. Julian stood. He was just a man in an expensive, rumpled suit. He walked out of the room, not with a bang, but with the quiet, pathetic shuffle of a man who had lost a war he didn't even know he was fighting. 3 months later, Ilara Vance gave birth to a healthy, 7-pound baby boy. She was not in the 10th floor maternity ward. She was in her own maternity ward, a custom-built, state-of-the-art medical facility on the top floor of the new Vance Thorne Center for Maternal Health at Weill Cornell, a $100 million donation she had made. Her father, Marcus, was the first person to hold his grandson after Ilara. He has your eyes, Marcus said, his voice thick with an emotion Ilara had never heard before. And God willing your mother's kindness, not mine. He'll have yours too, Ilara said, smiling. He's going to need that stubbornness. She named the baby Michael, after her late grandfather. Michael Vance. The world she had re-entered was different from the one she'd left. She wasn't Elara Thorne, the quiet curator, and she wasn't Elara Vance, the runaway heiress. She was just Elara, a mother, a CEO. She hadn't just taken back her name, she'd taken back her power. Thorne Capital was no more. In its place, Elara had launched the Vance Thorne New Ventures Fund. She'd kept the Thorne name as a permanent public reminder of what happens when you underestimate a Vance, a fund dedicated to investing only in female-founded tech and biotech companies. It was already valued at $10 billion, and it was actually making a profit. She had moved out of the St. Regis. She'd sold the Fifth Avenue penthouse, the gilded cage, and all of Julian's cold beige furniture. The proceeds, all $75 million, were the first donation to her new medical center. She and Michael now lived in a beautiful, warm, sprawling brownstone in the West Village, filled with books, art that she loved, and the sound of a baby's laughter. And Julian was seen sometimes, a haunted-looking man, sitting alone at the bar in a TGI Fridays in Murray Hill. The $500,000 was long gone, mostly to pay off the other debts he'd racked up. He'd tried to violate the NDA once, getting drunk and telling a Page 6 reporter a wild story. The reporter, who was on the Vance payroll, had simply deleted the recording. The next day, Julian's hot water had been turned off for a week. He'd never spoken to a reporter again. He was a ghost, a non-entity, erased. The final scene was not of vengeance, it was of peace. Elara stood on the terrace of her brownstone, holding Michael. The city glittered before them. Her phone buzzed. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Evelyn, but with a different kind of message. "Market's open. New fund is up 12%. You're a natural, boss. See you at the 10 a.m. meeting." Elara smiled, kissed her son's head, and walked back inside, ready for work. She had taken her father's steel and forged it into something new, something stronger, something hers. And that's the story of Elara Vance, a woman who was pushed to her absolute limit, only to find that her limit was so much further than her deceiver ever imagined. Julian thought he was a titan, but he was just a small man standing in the shadow of a true dynasty. He didn't just lose his money, he lost his name, his legacy, and his future. All while Elara reclaimed hers. This story is a powerful reminder. Never ever underestimate a person you've wronged. You might think you're holding all the cards, but you have no idea what kind of royal flush they're hiding. What did you think of Elara's revenge? Was it justice, or was it too cold? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved this story of high-stakes drama and ultimate karma, you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Please, like this video, share it with someone who loves a good revenge story, and most importantly, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. You have no idea what story we're breaking down next. She was the ex-wife, forced to attend her father-in-law's birthday dinner. He was the man who left her, and she was the mistress who took her place. The night was already a nightmare, but when the mistress stood up, pointed a finger, and called her worthless in front of the entire family, Evelyn was ready for the floor to swallow her whole. But what happened next was not a scolding. It was a corporate execution. The old man's reaction didn't just end the argument, it changed their fortunes forever. The invitation wasn't paper, it was a threat. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock, engraved with the Barrington family crest, a stylized eagle clutching a bundle of arrows. The ink was a deep, unforgiving black. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 70th birthday of Arthur Barrington. Evelyn Reed stared at it, her stomach tightening into a familiar knot. For 10 months, she had been Evelyn Reed. She had painstakingly scrubbed the Barrington from her mail, her credit cards, and most importantly, her identity. She was rebuilding. Her small apartment, though a stark downgrade from the Barrington estate, was hers. The fledgling financial advisory practice she was starting, specializing in helping women navigate difficult transitions, was hers. But Liam and Sophie, her children, were still Barringtons, and that was the leverage. "Mum, Grandpa called," her 12-year-old son, Liam, had said, his voice laced with an excitement she hadn't heard since the divorce. He said the party is at the Crestview, in the Oak Room, and he said you have to come. He said it wouldn't be a family party without you. Evelyn had closed her eyes. Arthur Barrington, her ex-father-in-law, was a man of few words, each one weighed and measured like gold. He was a formidable patriarch, a titan of industry who ran Barrington Holdings with the same cold, calculating precision he applied to his golf game. He had always been polite, even respectful, to Evelyn, but he was not a man who insisted lightly. And then there was the real problem. Her ex-husband, Mark, would be there. And so would she. Chloe. The name tasted like ash. Chloe, the 26-year-old marketing assistant from Mark's office. Chloe, with her perfect Instagram feed, her blindingly white teeth, and her complete lack of moral fiber. Chloe, who was now, according to the gushing society pages, Mrs. Mark Barrington. Evelyn had survived the affair. She had survived the discovery, the clandestine texts, the late nights at the office, the scent of a foreign perfume, Chanel Mademoiselle, a scent Evelyn now associated with betrayal, on his suits. She had survived the humiliating divorce where Mark's lawyers, funded by the Barrington billions, had tried to paint her as an unstable gold-digging spendthrift, despite her having signed an ironclad prenup 15 years prior. She had survived. But sitting at a table with them? Making small talk while Chloe flaunted the life that was stolen from her? That was a fresh kind of hell. "I don't know, honey," she started. "Please, Mum," her 10-year-old Sophie piped in, her eyes wide. "Grandpa Arthur sent a car for us, and he said he has a present for us, and one for you." A present, another piece of leverage. Arthur knew her weakness was, and always would be, her children. And perhaps a small traitorous part of her whispered, he knew her weakness was a lingering, desperate need for the family she had lost. So, here she was, 3 days later, standing in front of her modest closet, trying to find armor. Everything she owned felt inadequate. Her clothes were for PTA meetings and client consultations. They were nice. They were professional. They were not Barrington dinner at the Crestview attire. She finally settled on a deep navy blue sheath dress. It was classic, well-tailored and quiet. It was the antithesis of everything Chloe represented. She pulled her dark hair back into a simple chignon, put on the pearl earrings Mark had given her for their first anniversary, a small act of defiance, and a matching necklace. She looked elegant. She looked forgettable. She looked, she thought, with a pang of self-loathing, like a wife. The one thing she was not. The Blacktown car, sent by Arthur, was waiting downstairs. Her children, scrubbed and polished in their party best, piled in. "Do you think Chloe will be there?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Evelyn's hands tightened on her simple clutch. "Yes, honey. I'm sure she will be." "I don't like her," Sophie whispered, leaning her head against Evelyn's shoulder. "She told me my dress was cute but vintage. This dress is new." "She's different, honey," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "But tonight is for Grandpa. We are going to be polite. We are going to be strong. and we are going to show everyone what true class looks like. Understood?" "Yes, Mom," Liam and Sophie said in unison. The car glided through the city, pulling up to the imposing stone facade of the Crestview, a private club that looked more like a fortress. The doorman, James, who had known Evelyn for 15 years, did a subtle double-take. He had seen her last in a Bentley, dripping in diamonds for the Barrington annual gala. Now, she was in a simple dress, arriving in a hired car. His eyes were professional, but Evelyn saw the flicker of pity. It was worse than the malice. "Mrs. Reed," he said, correcting himself. "Welcome back. Mr. Barrington is in the Oak Room." Evelyn took a deep breath, plastered a serene smile on her face, and walked into the lion's den. The Oak Room was exactly as Evelyn remembered, suffocating. The walls were panelled in wood so dark it seemed to drink the light. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a single baronial-style table, set for 12, stretched down the centre. The air was thick with the smell of old money, leather and expensive scotch. They were already there. Arthur Barrington stood at the head of the table, looking every inch the patriarch. At 70, he was still a formidable figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and eyes as sharp and grey as a surgeon's scalpel. Beside him, holding his arm, was his daughter, Sarah, Mark's older sister. Sarah, who had always viewed Evelyn as a middle-class usurper, offered a nod so curt it was an insult. Her husband, Ben, a mild-mannered man who lived in Sarah's shadow, gave Evelyn a sympathetic grimace. And then there was Mark, her ex-husband. He looked thinner, more stressed than she remembered. The easy charm that had captivated her in college had curdled into a kind of weary petulance, and next to him, practically fused to his side, was Chloe. Tonight, Chloe was a supernova of bad taste and expense. She wore a backless, sequined gold dress that looked more appropriate for a nightclub in Miami than a patriarch's 70th birthday. A vulgar diamond necklace, the kind Evelyn recognized as a "sorry I'm a terrible person" gift from Mark, was choking her throat. Her blonde hair was teased into a mountain of impossible volume. She looked like a cheap caricature of a trophy wife. When she saw Evelyn, Chloe's smile widened, a predatory baring of teeth. "Evelyn, you came." Chloe's voice was high and breathy, a practiced performance of perpetual surprise. She glided over, leaving Mark behind, and enveloped Evelyn in a cloud of Mademoiselle. "We're just so glad you could make it. Mark wasn't sure you'd be comfortable." "Chloe," Evelyn said, her voice even. "It's good to see you. Happy birthday, Arthur." She deliberately turned her back on Chloe, walking with her children to the head of the table. Arthur's stern face broke into a genuine smile, the only genuine smile in the room, as Liam and Sophie launched themselves at him. "There they are, my legacy," he boomed, hugging them tightly. He then looked over their heads at Evelyn. His grey eyes met hers, and for a second she saw something complex in them. Gratitude, perhaps, or even apology. "Evelyn," he said, extending a hand, "thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing my grandchildren. You look lovely." "Happy birthday, Arthur," she said, squeezing his hand. "You don't look a day over 50. "Flattery will get you everywhere, my dear," he chuckled. "Oh, Arthur, don't let her fool you," Chloe trilled, reinserting herself. She looped her arm through Mark's, who had shuffled over. Evelyn was always good at that, managing people. The subtext was clear, manipulating. Mark flinched. "Chloe, please." "What? I'm just being honest," she giggled, sipping from a flute of champagne. "I'm a terrible liar. It's one of my flaws." Evelyn simply smiled, a cool, polite mask, and took her seat. The seating arrangement was a small mercy. Arthur had placed her on his left, with Liam and Sophie beside her. Mark, Chloe, Sarah, and Ben were seated across the table, a veritable no-man's land of polished mahogany between them. The dinner began. The service was impeccable. Waiters materialized with wine and water, silent and efficient. The first course, a lobster bisque, was served. The conversation was stilted. Sarah talked about her latest charity auction. Ben tried to engage Liam in a conversation about football. Mark said nothing, staring at his soup as if it held the secrets to the universe. Chloe, however, held court. And then I told the designer, I don't care if it's structural, I want that wall gone. The ensuite in the main house was just ancient. She was talking about the master bathroom at the Barrington estate, the bathroom Evelyn had designed. Mark, darling, you should have seen it. Beige everywhere, beige tile, beige counters, so worthless. Evelyn felt a hot flush creep up her neck. She had chosen that travertine marble herself. I'm updating the entire wing, Chloe continued, gesturing with her fork. All white, gold fixtures, and a big feature wall of that new Italian mirror tile. It's going to be fabulous. You'll have to come and see it, Evelyn. Oh, wait. She giggled, covering her mouth. That's right. Awkward. Chloe. Arthur's voice cut through the air, not loud but heavy. We are here to celebrate, not to redecorate. Chloe's smile wavered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered. Oh, of course, Arthur. You're right. To you. She raised her glass. The next ritual was presents. Sarah and Ben presented Arthur with a set of absurdly expensive, first-edition signed biographies of Winston Churchill. Then it was Chloe and Mark's turn. We wanted to get you something truly special, Dad, Mark said, his voice rehearsed. Chloe beamed as she slid a heavy lacquered box across the table. It's a Patek Philippe, Arthur. The new 52270G. We had to call in a lot of favors to get it. Arthur opened the box, looked at the incredibly complex, hideously expensive watch, and nodded. Thank you, Mark. Chloe. It's very generous. He closed the box and set it aside. Then he turned to Evelyn. And from my grandchildren? Evelyn felt Chloe's eyes boring into her, hungry for another failure, another chance to mock her downsized life. It's from us, Mum and Grandpa, Liam said, puffing out his chest. He and Sophie carried a modest, flat-wrapped gift. Arthur unwrapped it carefully. It was a simple, elegant silver frame. Inside was not a professional portrait, but a candid snapshot Evelyn had taken a few weeks ago at the park. It was a crisp autumn day, and Liam had his arm slung over Sophie's shoulder, both of them grinning, their cheeks rosy from the cold, leaves tangled in their hair. They looked, in a word, happy. Genuinely happy. Tucked into the frame was a small, handwritten note from Sophie. To Grandpa, we love you more than all the leaves. Love, Sophie and Liam. A thick silence fell over the table. Chloe looked bored, already sipping her champagne. Mark looked uncomfortable. Arthur stared at the photograph for a long time. His stern facade cracked. His eyes glistened, and he cleared his throat, a low, rumbling sound. This, he said, his voice thick with uncharacteristic emotion, is the finest gift I have received. Thank you. He placed the photo in the center of the table, directly in front of him, moving the $100,000 Patek Philippe watch box to the side to make room. Evelyn met Chloe's gaze across the table. The look in the younger woman's eyes was no longer amusement. It was pure, unadulterated venom. The battle line had been drawn. The main course arrived, perfectly cooked filet mignon. The tension, however, could be sliced with a butter knife. Chloe, clearly incensed by Arthur's reaction to the photograph, had switched from passive aggression to a more overt campaign of targeted slights. She found her opening when Arthur turned the conversation to business. "Ben," Arthur said, addressing his son-in-law, "the logistics report on the Singapore acquisition. It was thin. I need projections, not possibilities." "Of course, Arthur. I'll have it redone by Monday," Ben stammered. "And Mark," Arthur continued, his gaze shifting to his son, "the quarterly profits from the domestic distribution arm are down 4%. In this economy, that's not just a dip, it's a failure." "We're looking into it, Dad," Mark muttered, shrinking under his father's gaze. "It's the supply chain. It's complicated." "It's not complicated, Mark," Chloe suddenly interjected, placing her hand on Mark's arm. What Mark is too modest to say is that he's been focusing on the real future of the company, the Barrington Foundation. Evelyn's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The foundation had been her project. For 15 years, while Mark learned, and often failed at, the logistics side of the business, Evelyn had quietly managed the family's philanthropic arm. It was work she loved, work she was good at. She had grown its small endowment, funded a new pediatric oncology wing at St. Jude's, and established a series of scholarships. "I'm taking over the foundation, you know," Chloe announced to the table, her voice dripping with self-importance. It was so stale, all those sad hospital wings and dusty scholarships. It had no vision. Sarah, who was on the board of 3 major museums, actually looked interested. "Oh? What are you planning?" "Brand synergy," Chloe declared, as if she'd invented the concept. "I'm pivoting. We're going to be sponsoring high-fashion galas, modern art installations, things that get the Barrington name in vogue. Philanthropy should be an investment in the brand, not just a handout." "A fascinating perspective," Arthur said, his voice dangerously neutral. "Evelyn, as you recall, focused the foundation's efforts on high-impact community projects. The St. Jude's wing, for instance." "Oh, I know," Chloe laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on Evelyn's nerves. "But let's be honest, how much press did that really get? I'm talking about the Met Gala, Arthur. I'm talking about sponsoring a wing at the MoMA. That's legacy." "The St. Jude's wing," Evelyn said, her voice quiet but firm, "has a 94% success rate in pediatric leukemia treatment, and the scholarships we established have, to date, produced 22 engineers, 14 doctors, and 8 teachers. I always found the return on that investment to be quite high." Arthur nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Indeed. A tangible legacy. Your eye for detail on that project was always remarkable, Evelyn. I recall you personally renegotiated the construction contracts, saving the fund. What was it?" 18%, Evelyn said softly. The original contractor was padding the concrete bid. 18%, Arthur repeated, his eyes glinting as he looked at Mark. Imagine that. 18% saved by attention to detail. It was a direct hit. Mark, who had just lost 4% of his division, flushed a deep, angry red. Chloe saw the exchange. She saw the quiet, shared respect between Arthur and Evelyn. She saw her multi-million-dollar gala plans being dismissed in favor of concrete bids, and she saw her new husband being humiliated, her perfectly manicured hand, which had been caressing Mark's arm, clenched into a fist. The smile remained, but her eyes went cold and flat. The spark had been lit. The only thing missing was the fuel. She found it, as she always did, at the bottom of her third glass of champagne. The conversation had lulled. The waiters were clearing the main course plates. Liam, sensing the tension, had started to talk about his soccer team, a safe, childish topic. And Coach David said, "If I practice my corner kicks, I could be captain next season," he said, looking at his grandfather. "Well, that's excellent, Liam," Arthur said warmly. A captain needs responsibility. You'll have to work hard. He will, Evelyn said, putting her hand on her son's back. He's the most dedicated boy I know. He's a Barrington, Arthur said, nodding. It's in his blood, just like it's in Sophie's. They are my only heirs, you know. He smiled at the children. And as such, I've ensured they're well taken care of. The Barrington Educational Trust is fully funded for you both. Your mother, he nodded at Evelyn, was instrumental in structuring it all those years ago. Evelyn blushed. Arthur, I had my lawyer look over the drafts. You did more than that, Arthur said, dismissing her modesty. You fought for the personal development clause, the one I thought was frivolous, the one that now pays for Liam's soccer camps and Sophie's art classes. You had foresight. This was too much for Chloe. Evelyn getting credit for the house, Evelyn getting credit for the foundation, and now Evelyn getting credit for the children's trust funds. It was an assault on Chloe's very existence, which was predicated on the idea that Evelyn was obsolete. Foresight? Chloe's laugh wasn't a tinkle this time. It was a sharp, brittle crack. Mark's head snapped up. Chloe, don't! What, Mark? Don't what? She snapped, her voice rising. Don't tell the truth. We're all sitting here, playing this polite little game. It's ridiculous. Chloe, this is not the time or the place, Sarah said, her voice dripping with ice. Oh, shut up, Sarah, Chloe shot back, and Sarah's jaw dropped. You're just as bad, sitting there with your little auction programs. You've never liked me, but at least I'm not a hypocrite. She stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the polished wood floor. The waiters by the wall froze. We sit here and listen to Arthur praise her. She pointed a long, glittering finger at Evelyn, for structuring a trust. Are you kidding me? Evelyn didn't structure anything. She did what she was told. She signed where you and Mark told her to sign. That is not true, Evelyn said, her voice shaking, but low. Arthur, please, let's not do this. Oh, I'm doing this, Chloe snarled. She was drunk, angry, and most of all terrified. She was seeing her grip on the Barrington name, the grip she had destroyed a family for, slipping. You're all praising her. For what? For being a good little housewife? For popping out 2 heirs? That was her job. That's all she was good for. Chloe, Mark roared, his face pale with panic. Sit down. No, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of her sitting there in her sad little beige dress. She spat, misidentifying the navy blue in her rage, acting like she's some kind of martyr. You come here to my father-in-law's party, trying to remind everyone of the good old days? She advanced around the table, her eyes wild. Evelyn instinctively pulled Liam and Sophie closer. Chloe laughed, a desperate, ugly sound. The good old days? Mark told me about those days. He told me how boring you were, how predictable, how you had no ambition, no drive. You brought nothing to this family. She was now standing directly over Evelyn, who was forced to look up at her. He told me he was dying with you, that you were a placeholder, a warm body. He found a real woman, a woman with passion and ideas and a life. Tears were streaming down Evelyn's face now, hot and silent. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of a sob. You're an ex-wife, Evelyn. Your history. You contribute nothing to this family. You are nothing. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a theatrical, venomous whisper that everyone in the silent room could hear. You are worthless. The silence that followed the word worthless was not just a lack of sound. It was a vacuum, heavy and absolute, sucking all the air from the room. Chloe stood panting slightly, her chest heaving a triumphant, manic gleam in her eyes. She had finally said the quiet part out loud. She had detonated the bomb, and she was waiting for the applause of a victor. Liam was shaking, his face white. Sophie was crying silently into her mother's side. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at his plate, his billion-dollar inheritance flashing before his eyes. Sarah looked appalled, not out of empathy for Evelyn, but because such a vulgar display had interrupted dinner. Evelyn just sat there, frozen, the single word echoing in her ears. Worthless. 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 And then Arthur Barrington moved. He did not shout. He did not stand. He did not even look at Chloe. Slowly, with a terrible, deliberate precision, Arthur Barrington placed his heavy silver knife and fork on his plate. He set them down perfectly parallel, in the 4 o'clock position, signaling to the staff that he was finished. He picked up his water glass and took a small, measured sip. He then lifted his linen napkin, dabbing at lips that were not wet. The entire time, his eyes were fixed on one person, his son. "Mark," Arthur said. His voice was calm. It was not the voice of an angry man. It was the voice of a judge about to pass sentence. Mark flinched as if he'd been struck. "Dad, She's had too much to drink." "Chloe," Mark hissed across the table. "Apologize. Apologize to my father, and to Evelyn. Now." Chloe's triumph wavered, giving way to drunken confusion. "Apologize? For what? For telling the truth? She is worthless. You said so. You told me she—" "Quiet," Arthur Barrington commanded. The word was not loud, but it slammed into Chloe like a physical blow. She snapped her mouth shut, her eyes wide with sudden fear. For the first time that evening, Arthur turned his full, undivided attention to his new daughter-in-law. His grey eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were analytical. He looked at her as if she were a line item on a balance sheet that had just been found to be a catastrophic miscalculation. "You speak of worth," Arthur said, his voice a low, cold rumble. "Let us discuss worth, shall we, Chloe? You have been a Barrington for—" He paused, as if mentally consulting a calendar. "Approximately 18 months. In that time, you have overseen the redecoration of a historically significant home, turning it into, from what I hear, a fabulous monstrosity of white and gold. You wear," he continued, his eyes flicking to her necklace, "a Bulgari Serpenti necklace. Retail value, if I am not mistaken, is approximately 85,000. A welcome gift from my son, paid for by the family trust. Your dress," he gestured with one finger, "is, I am told, a Balmain, perhaps 15,000, also charged to the family account. You do not work. You do not, as you've just proven, understand the concept of philanthropy. You mistake spending money for having value. You are a cost, Chloe, an exceptionally high cost, low return liability." Chloe had gone from triumphant to terrified to a deep, blotchy red of pure rage. "How dare you!" "I am not finished," Arthur said, and she flinched back. He turned his gaze, which softened almost imperceptibly, to Evelyn. "Evelyn, on the other hand," he said, his voice becoming warmer, "came into this family 15 years ago. She had a first-class degree in finance from Wharton. She had a job at a promising investment firm, which she gave up. Not, as you so crudely put it, to pop out heirs, but to build a home, and to raise my grandchildren. A task you seem to find menial." "Arthur," Evelyn whispered, shaking her head, embarrassed by the defense. "No, Evelyn. This is long overdue." He turned back to the rest of the table. "While my son was learning the business, Evelyn, at my request, took over the bookkeeping for the foundation. And A few other small family accounts. Mark, for the first time, looked up from his plate, a new, dawning horror on his face. Dad, what accounts? You see, Chloe, Arthur continued, ignoring his son. You are correct about one thing. Evelyn was worthless to Mark. Because my son is a fool. He is a fool who would trade a bar of solid gold for a fistful of glitter. He was too blind, too weak, and too stupid to see her value. He let that hang in the air. Mark looked as if he'd been hollowed out. But she was never worthless to me, Arthur said. Or to Barrington Holdings. A new, more terrible silence fell. This was no longer a family squabble. The air in the room had changed. It was a boardroom. It was a reckoning. Evelyn was completely bewildered. Arthur, what are you talking about? I just managed the dividends. I balanced the checkbook for the foundation. Arthur smiled. It was a thin, predatory smile, the one he used right before a hostile takeover. My dear, you did far more than balance the checkbook. You and I. We've been in business together for over a decade. He looked at his son. Mark, do you remember, in 2010, when I gave you $20 million in seed capital to manage? Your first big boy portfolio? A test to see if you had any of my blood in you at all. Mark nodded, swallowing. Yes, sir. The MB Futures Fund. It's doing fine. It's up to $22 million. Arthur grunted. In 12 years, you have managed a pathetic 10% return. You haven't even beaten inflation, let alone the S&P 500. You lost me money, you idiot. You proved you were a capital eater, not a capital grower. Mark shrank. At the same time, Arthur continued, his voice resonating in the quiet room. I gave Evelyn a small hobby account, the seed capital from a few stocks I wanted to donate. I believe it was $500,000. I told her to manage it for the foundation's future. A little mad money for her to practice with. I didn't tell Mark, I didn't tell anyone. It was our little secret. Evelyn's eyes widened. The ELB fund. Arthur, I thought that was just a charity pot. I didn't. What did you do with that pot, Evelyn? Arthur asked, a professor prompting his star pupil. Well, the original stocks were stagnant, so I sold them, Evelyn said, her voice gaining a little confidence as she entered a world she understood. I moved the capital. I put 30% in high-yield bonds to create a stable base for the donations. The other 70% I invested. I bought into that little online bookstore in 2012, Amazon, and that tech company that made phones, Apple. I read their financials, and their PE ratios were solid, and their forward guidance. She trailed off, realizing she was rambling. I reinvested the dividends. I sold high. I bought the dips. It wasn't a game, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was just my little project. Your little project, Arthur said, a note of immense pride in his voice. Your little hobby. Chloe, Mark, my daughter, Sarah. I had my accountants run a full audit of the ELB fund, the Evelyn Barrington Fund, as she named it, this morning, in preparation for today. He paused, savoring the moment. As of this morning, that $500,000 hobby account is worth $9,472,000. The sound that came from Chloe was a strangled gasp. Mark's head dropped into his hands. She didn't just beat the S&P 500, Arthur said, his voice rising with triumph. She humiliated it. She did it quietly. She did it with no staff, no fanfare, and no salary. She did it while raising my grandchildren, managing a household, and dealing with distractions. His eyes flicked to Mark. She created a fortune from nothing, Arthur boomed. She created worth. While you, he looked at Chloe, were learning how to spell Balmain. While you, he glared at Mark, were turning 20 million into a rounding error. Evelyn was speechless. $9.4 million. She had done that. She knew it was growing, but she had been so focused on her divorce, her new life, that she hadn't run the totals in over a year. So, you see, Arthur said, we have a problem. He reached into the breast pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket. He pulled out, not one, but 2 thick, cream-colored envelopes. I was going to announce this after dessert, he said. But Chloe, in her unique way, has expedited the agenda. My 70th birthday present to myself is retirement. Effective Monday morning, I am stepping down as chairman and CEO of Barrington Holdings. Mark's head snapped up. His face, which had been a mask of despair, was suddenly alight with a desperate, greedy hope. This was it. Despite his failure, his father had to name him. He was the son. He was the heir. Chloe saw it too. Her eyes widened. This was her moment. She would be the wife of the CEO. The worthless comment, the scene, it would all be forgotten. She had won. She smiled, a shaky, terrible smile, and reached for Mark's hand. Arthur looked at his son. He looked at Mark's hopeful, pathetic face. And then, with the deliberate care of a hangman, Arthur slid the first envelope across the table. It stopped directly in front of his son. Mark, Arthur said, that is your severance package. The words hung in the air, heavier and more devastating than any physical blow. My what? Mark stammered, his hand frozen over the envelope. Your severance, Arthur repeated, his voice devoid of all emotion. You are being removed from the board. Your position as head of domestic distribution is terminated. The MB Futures Fund is being dissolved and absorbed back into the parent company. You will retain the shares from your mother's trust, which is adequate. But your employment and your influence at Barrington Holdings is over. You have failed, son. You have failed as a businessman, and you have failed as a man. You are no longer my concern. Dad, no, no! Mark's voice cracked. You can't. This is my company. It's my birthright. Your birthright was the privilege of my guidance, Arthur shot back, and you squandered it. You sold your legacy for her. His eyes flicked to Chloe with a look of such profound disgust it made her recoil. Chloe, for her part, was catatonic. Her face was a mask of chalky white, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. The words severance package were echoing in her head. The Patek Philippe, the Balmain dress, the redecoration, all of it built on the assumption of a future inheritance that had just evaporated. You old fool, she finally shrieked, finding her voice. You'll ruin us. You'll destroy the company. You can't just fire your own son. Who are you going to put it in charge? Ben, who had been trying to merge with the wallpaper, jumped. Absolutely not, Arthur, I'm not. I wouldn't. No, Ben, not you, Arthur said, almost gently. He picked up the second envelope. He turned to Evelyn. She was still reeling from the $9.4 million revelation, her mind racing, her heart hammering against her ribs. Arthur slid the second envelope across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of her plate. Arthur, I don't understand, she whispered. Evelyn, Arthur said, and his voice was no longer that of a judge or a general. It was the voice of a mentor, a partner. The board of Barrington Holdings met last week. I called an emergency session. I presented them with 2 files. File A was Mark's 12-year performance review. File B was your 12-year performance review, the audit of the ELB fund. He leaned forward. It was a very short meeting. The vote was unanimous. He tapped the envelope in front of her. "Congratulations, Evelyn. You are the new chairwoman and chief executive officer of Barrington Holdings. That is your employment contract and your signing bonus." Pandemonium. "What?" Chloe's scream was primal. It was the sound of a billion-dollar future dying. "That's impossible. She's not even a Barrington. She's worthless." "She's not a Barrington," Arthur thundered, his voice finally rising. "She is a Reed, and a Reed, it seems, is worth 10 Barringtons. As for her worth, she just proved it. To the tune of $9.4 million. She created a controlling interest for me that she didn't even know she had. She has my proxy. She has my vote. She has my trust." He stood up, towering over the table. "You," he pointed at Chloe, "spoke of worth. You value clothing. You value noise. You value vogue. Evelyn, she values fundamentals. She values substance. She values work. She, it turns out, is the only person in this family who shares my values." I can't," Evelyn said, staring at the envelope. "Arthur, I have a small advisory firm. I can't run a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate." "You can," Arthur said, his voice softening. "You will. You have been, in a way, for 15 years. You just didn't have the title. You have the best financial mind I have ever encountered. Better than mine. You have the foresight I spoke of. The company is not a birthright, Mark. It is a responsibility, and I am giving it to the only person here I trust with it." Mark was broken. He was sobbing, his head in his hands. "Dad, please, don't do this. I'll leave her. I'll leave Chloe right now. I'll do anything. Please." It was the most pathetic and most revealing statement of the night. Evelyn looked at the man she had once loved, now offering to trade his new wife for his old inheritance, and she felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just a cold, clean emptiness. Chloe heard it, too. Her frozen shock shattered into 1,000,000 pieces of pure, unadulterated rage. "You bastard!" she shrieked at Mark. "You'd leave me, after everything. You old fool!" she screamed at Arthur. "You've ruined everything." She grabbed the nearest object, her half-full glass of champagne, and hurled it at Arthur. Arthur didn't even flinch. James, the doorman, who had apparently been summoned by a silent alarm and was standing by the door with 2 uniformed security guards, moved with impossible speed. He intercepted the glass, the liquid splashing harmlessly onto his pristine white jacket. "This dinner," Arthur Barrington said calmly, "is over." "Arthur," Sarah, his daughter, finally spoke, her face ashen. "You can't be serious. You're giving the company to her. Over Mark." Arthur looked at his daughter. "The company is safe. My grandchildren's legacy is safe. That is all that matters. You would do well to remember who signs your dividend checks, Sarah. And as of Monday, it will be Evelyn." Sarah's mouth snapped shut. "James," Arthur said, "please escort Mrs. Barrington out." He used Chloe's name with surgical disdain. "No! Get your hands off me! I'm a Barrington!" Chloe shrieked as the security guards took her arms. Mark, do something!" Mark didn't even look up, his shoulders shaking as he wept over his severance package. "I'll sue you! I'll sue all of you! You'll hear from my lawyers!" Chloe screamed as she was physically dragged from the oak room. The heavy doors swung shut, cutting off her voice. The room was silent again. Mark was sobbing. Sarah and Ben were staring at their plates. Evelyn's hands were shaking so hard she couldn't pick up the envelope. Arthur sat back down. He picked up the framed photograph of his grandchildren. He smiled at it. He then looked at Evelyn, Liam, and Sophie. "Well," he said, as if nothing had happened. "I believe it's time for dessert. I ordered the chocolate lava cake. It's Evelyn's favorite." He raised his water glass, not to Mark, not to Sarah, but to Evelyn. "To the future," he said. "To Barrington Holdings, and to real worth." Evelyn, stunned, her world completely remade in the span of 10 minutes, looked at her children. Liam was staring at her, his eyes wide with awe. "Mum, are you the boss now?" A slow smile, the first real smile in years, spread across Evelyn's face. She looked at Arthur, who winked. She picked up her own water glass, her hand suddenly steady. "Yes, Liam," she said. "I think I am." The ride home was a symphony of unreality. The same black town car that had transported Evelyn to her execution was now taking her home from her coronation. The heavy, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Barrington Holdings logo, sat on her lap. It felt heavier than a tombstone. Inside, her children were processing the seismic shift in their universe. Liam, energized by the drama, was buzzing. "Mom, that was insane," he whispered, his eyes wide. "When Grandpa Arthur said that, about the 9.4 million dose, and then he just fired Uncle Mark, and Chloe, her face." "Liam," Evelyn said, her voice gentle but firm, putting a hand on his knee. "It was a very difficult night for everyone. We don't celebrate other people's pain, but she called you. You know," he mumbled, his bravado fading. "She deserved it." Evelyn had no answer for that. Sophie, on the other hand, was curled against the door, her small form rigid. She had been silent since they'd left the restaurant. "Soph, honey," Evelyn murmured, pulling her closer. "Are you okay?" Sophie's small voice was muffled by Evelyn's sleeve. Is Dad okay? He was crying." Evelyn's heart ached. This was the collateral damage. This was the part of the victory that felt like a defeat. She held her daughter tightly. "Your father is going through a very difficult time. He made some very bad choices, honey, and choices have consequences. But he is still your father, and he will find his way. That's not your burden to carry. But are you and him—" "No, honey," Evelyn said, the word final and clean. "No, that's over. But we—" She kissed Sophie's forehead, then Liam's. "We are going to be more than okay. We are going to be a new kind of family. And it's going to be good. I promise." The car pulled up to her modest 3-story apartment building. It suddenly looked small, like a doll's house, a temporary shelter she had mistaken for a home. She tucked the children into bed, reading Sophie an extra chapter of her book until her breathing evened out. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Evelyn walked into her small dining nook, which doubled as her office. She placed the heavy envelope on the table. For a long time, she just stared at it. Arthur's last words to her at the table echoed in her head. While the children ate their cake, he had leaned in. "They'll be in an uproar," he'd said, his voice low. "Sarah will try to organize the board. Mark will try to sue. They will all say you are unqualified. They will say you are an emotional choice, a spite choice. Your only response is to be better than them. Your only response is to win." He had given her one simple directive. "Monday, 8 a.m. boardroom. Be ready." Evelyn opened the envelope. The employment contract was thick, the language dense. But the numbers were breathtaking. The salary was staggering. The signing bonus alone was enough to buy her apartment building 3 times over. The stock options, vesting immediately, made her one of the largest individual shareholders in the company, second only to Arthur. She was rich, not just ex-wife of a rich man. Comfortable. She was, in her own right, independently, powerfully wealthy. But that wasn't the point. The power wasn't in the money. It was in the title, printed in stark black ink. Evelyn Reed, Chairwoman and Chief Executive Officer. A cold wave of terror washed over her. I can't do this. She was a small-scale advisor. She helped women manage divorce settlements. She ran a charity fund. This was a multi-billion-dollar international logistics and holdings company. She stood up, pacing her small living room. I'm a fraud. He's crazy. This is a mistake. I'm Evelyn. Just Evelyn. She stopped in front of a small mirror by the door. She looked at her reflection. The navy blue dress, the pearls, the tired, tear-streaked face. Worthless. Chloe's voice echoed, and with it came a sudden, clarifying rage. It was a cold, pure anger. Not at Chloe, not even at Mark. It was anger at herself, for believing it, forever, even for a second, believing she was anything less. She went back to the table. She pulled out her laptop. She found the login credentials Arthur had slipped her on a small folded card. The full access, he'd called it. For the next 36 hours, Evelyn Reed disappeared. She did not sleep. She did not eat, save for half a box of stale crackers and endless cups of black coffee. She descended into the digital soul of Barrington Holdings. At first it was overwhelming. But then, her finance degree from Wharton, the mind that had been dormant and numbed by carpools and charity luncheons, kicked in. The numbers on the screen began to sing. She saw what Arthur had seen. The company was a sleeping giant. But she also saw the rot, as she now called it. She saw Mark's signature everywhere. Bloated innovation departments that produced nothing but press releases. Vanity projects, a high-end, failing Barrington Lifestyle magazine, a pet project of Chloe's that was losing $2 million a quarter. She saw sweetheart deals with suppliers run by Mark's college fraternity brothers. It was sloppy, it was lazy, it was privileged. And then she saw the opportunities. The core logistics business was solid, but its technology was a decade out of date. The ELB fund, her fund, had deep holdings in 2 small, cutting-edge AI-driven logistics platforms. She could acquire them. She could integrate them. By 4 a.m. on Monday morning, her dining table was covered in yellow legal pads. She had a new org chart. She had a 100-day plan. She had a list of 3 entire divisions she was going to liquidate, and 2 companies she was going to acquire. She had become the CEO. She showered, the water washing away the last 15 years. She didn't look at the modest, sensible clothes in her closet. She walked to the very back, to a garment bag she hadn't opened in years. She had bought it on consignment, a moment of defiant aspiration, right after the divorce was finalized. It was a charcoal grey Tom Ford power suit. It had cost her 2 months' rent, and she'd never had the nerve to wear it. She put it on. It fit like armor. She pulled her dark hair back into a severe, polished chignon. She put on her simple pearl earrings. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror. The tired, sad woman was gone. In her place was a stranger, a formidable, cold, and composed executive. She did not take a car. She hailed a yellow taxi. She wanted to arrive on her own terms. As the taxi cut through the morning traffic, she looked at the Barrington Tower, a sleek, black glass monolith that pierced the city skyline. It wasn't a building. It was a kingdom. Her kingdom. She walked into the lobby. The marble gleamed. The air hummed with quiet, expensive power. The security guard at the desk looked up, confused, as she walked toward the executive elevators. And then he was there. Mark. He was waiting for her, leaning against a marble pillar, and he looked like a ghost. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, shot through with panic. He was wearing the same bespoke suit from the dinner, now rumpled and smelling faintly of stale scotch and desperation. "Evelyn," he croaked, his voice raw. He rushed toward her, his hands outstretched. Evelyn stopped. She did not flinch. She did not look sympathetic. She did not react at all. She just waited. "Evelyn, Ellie, please," he begged, his voice cracking. The lobby was quiet, but several people were subtly watching. "You can't do this. It's a mistake. It's my father's. He's senile. He's doing this to punish me. You don't know the business. You'll run it into the ground. You'll destroy my legacy, our children's legacy." I managed to turn $500,000 into $9.4 million, Mark, she said, her voice cool and clear in the echoing hall. "I think I'll manage. Please." He grabbed her arm. His grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. I was a fool, a blind, stupid fool. I know that. I'll divorce Chloe today. I'll file the papers today. It was always you, Ellie. It was always you. She was a mistake. A worthless mistake. He used the word. He threw it at his new wife as easily as it had been thrown at her. And in that moment, 15 years of love, of memory, of shared history, didn't just die, it turned to ash and blew away. We can fix this," he pleaded, his eyes filling with tears. "The kids, the family, us, we can be a family again. I'll support you. You can run the foundation. You can have whatever you want. Just tell him no. Tell him you won't do it. Tell him I'm the CEO. Please, Ellie, I'm begging you." He was looking at her with the same desperate, charming eyes that had wooed her in college, the same eyes that had lied to her as he left for late meetings, smelling of Chanel Mademoiselle. Evelyn looked down at his manicured hand gripping her forearm. Then she looked up, meeting his frantic gaze. "You're pathetic, Mark," she said. Not with anger, not with heat, but with the cold, sterile finality of an audit. "You're not begging for me. You're begging for your allowance. You didn't want me when you thought I was worthless. You only want me now because I have your company, because I have the power." She calmly, and with great deliberation, took her left hand and pried his fingers off her arm, one by one. She dropped his hand as if it were contaminated. "It's not your company anymore, Mark. It's mine. Evelyn, please." He was sobbing now, a broken, desperate man in the middle of a billion-dollar lobby. "Don't do this to me. Don't." Ding. The executive elevator, the private one that went straight to the 50th floor, opened. A man in a sharp, conservative suit stood inside. He was older, with a placid face and watchful eyes. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice respectful. "I'm Michael. Mr. Barrington's... I'm sorry, your executive assistant. The board is waiting for you in the penthouse conference room." Evelyn nodded, her composure absolute. "Thank you, Michael. I've reviewed the preliminary agenda. Please have the quarterly performance reports for the lifestyle division on the screen when I arrive, and a large black coffee." "Of course, Ms. Reed." Michael stepped back to let her in. Evelyn took one step into the elevator. "Evelyn!" Mark shouted, a last desperate wail that bounced off the cold marble. Evelyn didn't look back. She faced forward, her shoulders straight, as Michael pressed the door close button. The polished steel doors slid shut. In them, Evelyn saw her own reflection, clear, sharp, and whole. And for a split second, she also saw the distorted, weeping image of the man she had left behind. The elevator car was silent, smooth and fast. It rocketed upward. "Excuse me, Mark," she whispered to the closed doors. "I have a meeting." Evelyn didn't just get her dignity back, she took the entire company. The story of the worthless wife is a powerful reminder that value isn't about the clothes you wear or the name you carry. It's about the work you do when no one is watching. Chloe filed for a bitter divorce, but found that Mark's severance wasn't even enough to cover her legal fees. Mark Barrington, stripped of his power and his inheritance, is now a cautionary tale whispered about in the country clubs he can no longer afford. And Evelyn? She's currently on the cover of Forbes. If you were moved by Evelyn's story and believe in the power of quiet competence, hit that like button. What do you think Arthur's real plan was? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who has ever been underestimated. And for more true-life stories of drama, revenge, and incredible transformation, click subscribe and ring that bell. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.